For more stories like this, hit the like button and subscribe so we can create more videos like this. Life itself is the greatest teacher, and wisdom can come from the most unexpected people, moments, and failures, if we stay humble and open to learning. Daniel Scott was a man admired by many. A successful corporate trainer in London, he was always dressed in crisp suits, delivered inspiring talks on leadership, and moved with the kind of confidence that made people trust him instantly. At just 35, he had published 2 books, spoken at dozens of conferences, and was seen as a symbol of modern intellect and personal discipline. But what most people didn't see, or didn't dare to question, was his quiet arrogance. Daniel believed he had reached a point where there was little left for him to learn. After all, who could teach a man who teaches everyone else? One rainy Thursday afternoon, Daniel was rushing to a speaking engagement across the city when the downpour became too heavy. He ducked into a quiet little cafe he had never noticed before. The Wishing Cup, it was called. The cafe was small, warm, and filled with the comforting aroma of coffee beans and old wood. As he shook off the rain from his coat, his eyes landed on a man sitting alone in the corner. He looked like he belonged to another era. Gray hair tucked under a worn cap, a wool sweater with frayed cuffs, and in front of him a small notebook filled with handwritten notes. Curious, Daniel ordered a coffee and sat down. He opened his laptop, intending to polish his next presentation. But his eyes kept drifting to the old man in the corner, who scribbled thoughtfully into the notebook, occasionally looking out the window as if he was watching the world in slow motion. Daniel found it odd. In a city where everyone rushed, this man seemed to be at peace with stillness. As fate would have it, Daniel's phone slipped from the table and slid toward the old man's feet. The man picked it up gently and handed it back with a kind smile. "Careful," he said in a soft voice. "Some things are more fragile than they seem." Daniel chuckled. "Thanks." "You write a lot?" The man nodded. "Every day." "What about?" Daniel asked, half out of politeness. The old man looked at him with eyes that seemed to hold stories from 100 lifetimes. "Mistakes, observations, lessons the world teaches me." Daniel smirked slightly. "You sound like a philosopher." "No," the man said, "and just a man who started learning a bit too late." Something in that answer made Daniel pause. The man introduced himself as Harold, a retired factory worker who had once wasted decades chasing wealth, ignoring family, and thinking he already knew everything worth knowing. "I didn't learn from books," Harold said. "I learned from loss, from failure, from being wrong more times than I can count. I started writing this notebook after I lost everything. Money, friends, even my health. I thought if I could capture the lessons, I wouldn't waste what remained of my life." Daniel stared at him. For the first time in a long while, he didn't have a smart reply. The man's humility was disarming. "Do you want to read something from it?" Harold asked. Daniel nodded slowly. Harold flipped to a page and read softly. "Pride tells you there's nothing left to learn. Life proves you wrong, gently at first, then painfully if you still don't listen. Every person you meet knows something you don't. Every moment, even a painful one, carries a seed of wisdom, if you're humble enough to look." Daniel sat in silence, his coffee growing cold. That single paragraph hit harder than most books he'd read in years. In the weeks that followed, Daniel found himself returning to that cafe. He started having long conversations with Harold. The old man never tried to impress him, never boasted, and never judged. He simply shared from his heart, from his mistakes, and from his quiet reflections. Daniel began to see the world differently. He noticed how the barista smiled at tired customers, how a child waited patiently while his mother juggled grocery bags, how an elderly woman gave her umbrella to a stranger. These small moments, once invisible to him, now felt like whispers from the universe. One evening, Daniel asked Harold if he ever regretted not learning earlier. Harold smiled. "Number, I'm just glad I finally started, and now someone like you is listening. That's more than enough." Years later, when Harold passed away peacefully in his sleep, Daniel stood quietly at his small memorial. He held the notebook Harold had gifted him on their last meeting, its pages filled with reflections, parables, and raw truth. Daniel never published another book under his name. Instead, he began teaching something far more valuable than corporate techniques. He started teaching humility, openness, and the wisdom of real-life experience. He even added a note to every one of his lectures. My greatest teacher wasn't a best-selling author or a famous speaker. It was an old man with a forgotten notebook who reminded me that life speaks quietly, and only the humble can hear it. Moral of the story: wisdom isn't limited to classrooms or credentials. Often it comes from the quiet corners of life, in conversations with ordinary people, in moments we overlook, and in the experiences we once tried to forget. Life is the greatest teacher. If we choose to listen, stay humble, and never stop learning,